We're counting down the 10 toughest, ugliest bush planes ever built. Machines where brute strength matters and good looks are just a distraction. From boxy cargo haulers with straight-up square corners to wild experimentals that look like post-apocalyptic farm equipment, each of these sky beasts earned its place by surviving landings, loading up impossible freight, and taking a beating no Ferrari could endure. You will see designs that seem to defy physics, crash-proof cockpits, landing gear that laughs at potholes, and engineering so rugged it could outlast the end of the world. But which flying brute takes the #1 spot for the toughest survivor in the wild? Let's start the countdown at number 10. Number 10 is the short SC7 Skyvan, known everywhere as the Flying Shed. This is not a plane that tries to hide its purpose. The fuselage is a perfect rectangle, 6.5 feet high and just as wide, running nearly 19 feet from ramp to cockpit, like someone welded wings to a shipping container. Forget curves, every inch is about maximizing volume. That rear ramp isn't just for show. Operators have loaded everything from pallets of bricks to compact 4x4s, even rolling in a Land Rover with inches to spare. The deck sits low to the ground, so you can back up a forklift or drive straight in, no fancy equipment, just brute practicality. With a payload of up to 2,000 kilograms and a cruise speed around 150 knots, the Skyvan shrugs off mud, gravel, and jungle strips. One operator put it best: if it fits in the shed, it flies. It's ugly, it's slow, but nothing hauls more odd-shaped freight for its size. This is Brute Rule 1. Boxy means business. Number 9 is the Britten-Norman Islander, the Land Rover of the sky. This one is all about stubborn reliability. Fixed landing gear, no hydraulics, no retraction, nothing to jam or freeze when you are miles from the nearest hangar. The Islander does not care about drag or looking pretty. It cares about getting up and down, again and again. That is why you will find it running lifeline routes across the Caribbean and the Scottish Islands, landing on strips barely 400 meters long, sometimes in winds that would ground most twin-engine aircraft. Operators have clocked over 20,000 cycles on some airframes, and the dispatch rate is legendary. If you need to get people or supplies in and out, this is the tool for the job. Routine crosswind landings in gales of 35 knots? Just another day for the Islander. Sure, it is not the biggest hauler, but when the weather is ugly and the runway is short, nothing keeps flying like this old brute. That is Brute Rule 2, fixed gear equals uptime. Number 8 is the Dornier Do 228, known among pilots as the Snout. This one throws out the rulebook on style and leans hard into utility. The fuselage is square, almost stubbornly so, with a blunt nose that looks like it was designed by a committee of engineers who never met an aerodynamicist. But there is a reason for every odd angle. The Do 228 can switch from passenger runs to cargo hauls in under half an hour thanks to quick-change interior kits. One operator once swapped out all 19 seats in less than 25 minutes, just in time to load up with medical supplies for a remote strip. The landing gear is pure German pragmatism, oversized tires, stone deflector fairings, and a geometry built to shrug off gravel and debris. This thing is at home on rough unpaved runways where most planes would lose a wheel. With a range of 1,200 nautical miles, the Do 228 is not just a brute, it is a shapeshifter ready for whatever the bush throws at it. As one seasoned operator put it, it may look like a toolbox with wings, but I can turn it into anything I need, fast. That is why it earns its spot, not for crash survivability tricks, but for sheer engineered versatility. Number 7 is the Transavia PL-12 Airtruk, the plane that looks like it crawled out of a scrapyard and then ate the scrapyard for breakfast. Two tail booms jut out from the back, leaving a 6-foot gap, wide enough for a farm truck to back right up between them and dump a load of fertilizer straight into the hopper. The cockpit sits 7 feet above the tank, perched like a lifeguard's chair on steel scaffolding. It is not a style choice, it is survival engineering. In a crash, that high seat keeps the pilot clear of fences, ditches, or whatever else a low-flying agricultural plane might meet, at the end of a rough paddock. The main gear has an 18-inch stroke, soaking up hard landings that would snap the legs off lesser planes. Everything about the Airtruk is built around the brutal realities of farm work, quick loading, quick turnaround, and a fighting chance if things go sideways. One Australian crop duster summed it up: "You can bend the wings, but you will still walk away." It is ugly, it is single-minded, and it is brilliant at what it does. That is why it earns its spot, because sometimes ugly means you get to fly another day. At number 6 sits a machine that looks like a dare from an engineer who lost a bet: the PZL M-15 Belphegor. Imagine a Soviet biplane with a jet engine strapped on top, chemical tanks hanging between the wings, and enough exposed plumbing to make a plumber blush. The Belphegor was not just ugly, it was a full-blown experiment in overkill. The idea came straight from Warsaw in the 1970s, when planners wanted to replace thousands of aging crop dusters with a modern jet-powered marvel. The result was a biplane that burned 3 times as much fuel as the old piston workhorses, guzzling kerosene at a rate that would make an airline accountant faint. It could barely haul its own weight, let alone a full load of chemicals. Operators in the field grumbled about maintenance headaches and fuel bills, but the project rolled on, driven more by ministry memos than by any pilot's wish list. In the end, only 175 Belphegors were built before the program was quietly shelved, most of them retired within a decade. Today it stands as a cautionary tale: brute force and wild ideas only work if they fit the job. The Belphegor was big, bold, and unmistakable, but in the world of bush planes, even ugly has to earn its keep. Number 5 is the air tractor AT-802, the armored beast. This is what happens when you take a farm plane and give it a job that would scare a helicopter. The AT-802 started life as a crop duster, but its bones were always overbuilt, with thick spars, massive landing gear, and a cockpit perched high above the spray tanks. That same chassis became the backbone for one of the world's most versatile utility aircraft. When wildfires break out, the Fireboss version hits lakes, scooping up 820 gallons of water in a single pass before dumping it on the flames. When the job shifts to war zones or anti-narcotics patrols, the AT-802U goes in with armor kits, Kevlar panels lining the cockpit, bullet-resistant glass, and self-sealing fuel tanks. Field reports out of Colombia tell of these planes taking hits from 7.62mm rounds and flying home, the pilot protected by the same ugly, rugged design that started in the Dust Bowl. Despite all that armor, the AT-802 still gets in and out of 500-meter dirt strips, carrying more payload than many twin-engine competitors. The secret, Rule 4, is those oversized struts and trailing link gear built to absorb punishment, whether it is a hard landing in the outback or ground fire in a jungle clearing. It is not the fastest, and it will not win any beauty contests, but when you need a plane that can haul, scoop, and survive a gunfight, the armored beast does not flinch. That is why it sits at number 5, versatile, armored, and always ready for the next disaster. Number 4 is the PZL-104 Wilga, better known as the Insect. At first glance, it looks like a grasshopper that wandered into a welding shop, with spindly legs, a bug-eyed cockpit, and a stance that practically dares you. But every odd angle on the Wilga has a job. This is the plane you call when you need to see straight down into the forest or drag a glider skyward from a muddy field. The secret weapon is that wild bulged canopy. That canopy gives eyes straight down. With a 44-degree downward view, the pilot can spot a moose in the brush or line up a landing on a postage stamp clearing. It is like flying inside a fishbowl, awkward to look at, but unbeatable for search and rescue, game patrol, and survey work. Then there is the landing gear, trailing link legs with 12 inches of travel. That is a full foot of shock absorption, built to swallow potholes and ruts that would snap the struts off a lesser plane. Touch down hard, and the Wilga just shrugs. The real party trick is the tow hook. The Wilga can yank a 1,500 kilogram glider off a grass strip and climb out like a homesick elevator, thanks to a beefy radial engine and wings loaded with slats. Pilots joke that it can almost climb vertically when towing, and the numbers back it up. It is not armored, and it is not a water bomber. But for pure specialty work, observation, towing, and bush flying, the Wilga is the precision brute. Ugly, sure. But when you need eyes on the ground and a plane that lands where others fear to taxi, the insect is the tool for the job. Number 3 is the Pilatus PC-6 Porter, also known as the Swiss knife. At first glance, it looks like someone stretched a bush plane's nose out with a winch and then bolted on a sliding barn door. That nose is not just for show. It is there to balance a turboprop engine that weighs nearly as much as a small car. It is a look only an engineer could love. There is a reason pilots revere this machine. Nothing else can do what the Porter does at altitude. In 1960, a PC-6 made history by landing on the Dhaulagiri Glacier in Nepal, 18,500 feet above sea level. That is higher than most helicopters can hover, and nearly 3 times the altitude of a typical bush strip. The air up there is so thin you can barely breathe, and most engines wheeze just thinking about it. But the Porter, loaded with mountaineering gear, touched down and took off again in less than 1,100 feet on a surface that might as well have been polished glass. The pilot's logbook from that flight reads like a checklist for the impossible. Density altitude was off the charts, center of gravity was calculated to the inch, and engine torque was watched with white knuckles. One slip and you are out of runway, out of air, and out of luck. The secret weapon is the 6-foot sliding side door. It turns the PC-6 into a flying pickup. Load in barrels, rescue stretchers, or a team of climbers without breaking a sweat. Operators love how you can yank the door open, toss in a pallet, and slam it shut, all while parked on a glacier or a gravel bar. With a takeoff roll of just 1,050 feet at 18,000 feet density altitude, the Porter rewrites what is possible in mountain flying. It is not easy to maintain, turbine engines are picky, and the long nose makes ground handling quirky. But if you need to land where no one else dares, ugly is exactly what you want. That is why the Swiss knife earns its spot: unmatched altitude performance, pure brute function, and a profile only a mother could love. Number 2 is the DHC-4 Caribou, better known among cargo crews as the gravel truck. This is not your average bush hauler. It is a heavy metal brute with a rear ramp that can swallow half a platoon or a load of oil drums in one gulp. The Caribou's tail sits 10 feet off the ground, and the ramp geometry is pure genius. Trucks can back straight up for offloading, even on a strip that is more pothole than pavement. The wings are inverted gulls, drooping down at the roots and swooping up at the tips, keeping those big propellers out of the rocks and mud. It is ugly in the way a dump truck is ugly. Every dent and rivet is there to do a job. In Vietnam, the Caribou earned its scars the hard way. October 1966, the crew of a Caribou was tasked with a medevac at a landing zone called the Wall, a patch of dirt barely 1,200 feet long, boxed in by jungle and enemy fire. The pilot brings the gravel truck in low, slams it onto the strip, and applies reverse thrust so forcefully the tail nearly lifts off. They load the wounded in under a minute, turn the bird around on a dime, and claw back into the air before the mortars find their range. For that sortie, the crew earned the Distinguished Flying Cross. That is not just a medal, that is a metric. Payload is 10,000 pounds, landing roll 1,200 feet when combat loaded. In the bushplane world, those numbers are the gold standard for brute force. The Caribou does not care about speed, it cares about getting in and out, no matter how short, soft, or shot up the runway is. It is not the easiest to fix in the field, there are simpler planes coming, but when the mission is heavy and the landing zone is a nightmare, the gravel truck is the hero you call. That is why it sits at number 2. Combat proven and a payload king, built to slam down where others will not even try. Number 1 on the brute list is not just a bushplane, it is a living legend. The Antonov An-2, known from Poland to Mongolia as the Tractor, rewrites the rulebook on survival. This is what happens when you build an airplane for a world where the nearest hangar is 1,000 miles away and winter means -40. The An-2 is the biggest single-engine biplane ever built, but it is not just size that puts it at the top. It is the philosophy, brute simplicity, field repair, and a flight envelope. So forgiving it is almost unfair. This machine does not bother with aluminum skins or composite curves. The wings and fuselage are fabric stretched over a steel tube skeleton. In Siberia, when the wind rips a hole in the covering, mechanics patch it with canvas, tarp, or whatever is on hand, sometimes even flour sacks or old curtains. There are stories of pilots landing on frozen rivers, lighting a blowtorch under the oil pan to coax the engine awake, then flying off into a sunrise that would ground lesser planes for months. The An-2 shrugs off cold that would freeze a modern jet solid. Operators have coaxed these birds to life at -40 using nothing more than a little gasoline and a lot of nerve. Forget about stall speed. The An-2 has slats on the wings and so much lift it can keep flying at just 35 knots, so slow that in a strong Siberian headwind, it looks like it is hovering. There is no stall warning horn because there is no real stall. You can hold the stick all the way back, and the An-2 just mushes gently, wings still biting into the air. This is why it is flown over rice paddies in China, taiga in Russia, and jungle strips in Laos. It does not care about runways. It lands on grass, dirt, snow, or whatever is flat enough to call a field. More than 18,000 An-2s have been built since 1947, and some have logged over 70 years of service. There are tales of mechanics swapping out a broken strut with a truck axle or using household bolts and wire to get one more season out of a tired airframe. If you need a part, you make it. If you need to fly, you do. In the bush, that is what matters. You cannot break an An-2, you can only make it uglier. And that is why it is the king of the brutes. When the world ends and the last gas station closes, there will still be an An-2 flying overhead, patched, battered, and utterly unstoppable. Across all these flying brutes, one pattern stands out. In the wild, survival isn't about speed or style, it is about outlasting everything nature throws at you. Boxy frames, exposed rivets, and rugged gear aren't flaws. They're proof these machines put function first. In the harshest places on Earth, ugly means unstoppable. Which brute would you trust when looks don't matter? Let me know in the comments.